Okay, I think we can begin. So I would first like to start by welcoming everyone today to the webinar on the Sustainable Development Goals of the UN 2030 Agenda. I have with me as your presenters today, Claire Dallaire and Daniel Masso. I'll allow them to introduce themselves later on, but first I would like to start by presenting you our opening slides. My name is Whitney Clark. I will be your moderator today. I am a project manager and customer relationship manager in policy and partnerships. Claire, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Welcome and good afternoon, everybody. So I'm Claire Dallaire. I'm project manager at the CEN and CENELEC Management Center.
Daniel, if you would like to introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Daniel Masso, and I work as a head of knowledge and 2030 agenda at UNE, which is the national Spanish standardization body.
Good. I would also like to remind everybody that the slides will be available afterwards. So if you're looking to contact either Claire or Daniel, you will have their email addresses at that. I would like to remind everybody that you are muted. Usually we like to restrict it to a Q&A panel, but for this specific recording, we decided to leave the chat open. We will be monitoring the chat as best as possible. And to talk to us on Twitter, we would like to encourage you to use our hashtag Training for Standards at Standards for EU. On our agenda today, we have the Sustainable Development Goals, improve life around the world, reminder on the SDGs and their importance, why this project and why now, the project scope, the project outcome, how to map a new revised project against the SDGs, and the takeaways.
Yes. And so just thank you for the agenda, Whitney. So the purpose of this webinar is really to inform you about the CEN and CENELEC project on the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which we will call SDG during this presentation. So as Whitney mentioned, we will recall a bit what are the SDGs, their importance, and the link for standardization, and tell you more about this project. We will start now with a short video released by the United Nations, introducing the 17 goals and the challenges we face today.
The United Nations is an organization with goals of peace and sustainable development around the world. Their mission is huge, but we're breaking it down in 2 minutes. 17 sustainable development goals. Let's get to them, cause the more you know. Look, in some corners of the world today, people are living on $1 a day. Hey, that's not how it ought to be. So go 1, eliminate poverty, and go 2, root out hunger across the globe. There's 800 million people hungry if you want to know. Number 3 is health and well-being, and getting people the health care that they need in. Learning in school are the harder goal for. Education opens up minds and doors. Goal number 5 is empower girls and women so they can have the same rights that men are given. Number 6, people need water that's clean. Poor sanitation can spread disease. Carbon-free energy is goal number 7, and how to achieve it is the question that's pressing. But if we put our minds together and work hard, we can find a solution, I'm guessing. 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it. 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it. Now imagine that you work all day for no pay. Economic growth and decent work is goal 8. Goal number 9 is to foster innovation in infrastructure and industrialization. Goal number 10, inequality reduction. 11 is sustainable city construction. 12, well, that's sustainable consumption. So what we use matches up with production. Goal 13 calls for urgent action to combat climate change, cause we know it's happening. 14, protect life under seas. 15, protect life on land. Goal 16 is for peace and justice. All over the planet, they're in high demand. And the final goal, number 17, is the critical factor, the heart of the machine. It's the strength in the way we achieve these goals of sustainable development around the globe. Yo, 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it. 17 sustainable development goals to improve life all around the globe. Protecting human health and the environment. Whatever bed we make, we gon' have to lie in it.
Hope you like it. We found this video both forward-thinking and inspirational. And now we have a question for you. So if we can go back to the PowerPoint. How much do you know about the SDG and the Agenda 2030? So you can scan the QR code on screen or go to Menti. I will put it in a chat and enter the code. And the question is, what words would you relate to the Agenda 2030? What words would you relate to the Agenda 2030? And I will hand over to Daniel for the
There
reply.
is, before that, there is another question, which is, how many countries signed the 2030 agenda?
Sorry.
So once, I think you can see my screen now, is it?
Yes.
Okay. So I put in the chat also the direct. Thank you, Andrea, for your feedback. So you can answer. Okay. This is, I always start with these tricky questions. Sorry for that. Okay, 23. And how many are? 83 participants. Stefan, you should know it, eh? Because I have some colleagues from Monet here attending the webinar. And I already delivered them some training on this topic. So, I mean, this is not compulsory that they remember. Okay. You can think in the next question. The next question is, what words do you relate to this 2030 agenda? Okay, so I leave it like this. You can keep on answering if you want, but I'll go to the next question, and then we'll come back to the solutions. So I'm going to present this one. Okay, you're already answering. That's great. This is I like this word cloud particularly. You put sustainability is winning because it's the bigger word and it's in the center. Environment, change. I'm missing some words. Circularity.
Collaboration. Green deal.
Standard. Yes. Someone put the standard. It's because you are standardizers. Okay, that's great. Eh? I love
Clear
this.
targets. Yeah.
Clear target. No, I don't see the word opportunity. Which is for me, it's an opportunity. Quality, safe, standard. Okay. Circular economy, alliances. Very good, very good. It seems that you have a clear idea. sustainability, environment, quality, it's yeah, they're winning. So yes, it sounds great.
Future.
Yeah, future is very good also. New transition, responsibility. Okay, I leave it there. Maybe we'll come back and download the answers and so on. This is just to wake a little bit. In Spain, you know, it's the time to wake up from the siesta. Not anymore. It was many years ago. So I love to start with these things. So maybe we can go to the PPT, to the presentation, if you want. The answer in the first question were all of the countries in the members, all of the members in the United Nations, and there were 193 at the moment it was approved. So many of you have guessed the answer. So congratulations, that's good. You have it here, yeah. Okay, 11 of you, and you can keep on answering this, and we will come back. Can you share the presentation again?
Can you see it?
Okay, next one.
There we go.
Okay, yeah, it was approved in 7 years ago by all the members, 193. Yeah, a little bit of introduction about this 2030 agenda. Basically, it replaced the Millennium Goals. I don't know if you've heard about them. The Millennium Goals were released when we reached the new millennium. But I think they didn't get so much success because probably they were more addressed to developing countries, and we, the rest, we live in Europe, and we were not really committed with them. So they come with this 2030 agenda, and it affects all of us. This is not just for developing countries, this is for all the countries. Basically, it's sustainability, as you mentioned. Sustainability is the key, and it's in fact it's articulated in 17 sustainable development goals, which are divided in targets. So there are 169 targets. They're articulated in 5 dimensions, which are also known as the 5 Ps. The 5 Ps are people, prosperity, planet, peace, and partnerships, not alliances, but partnerships. It's in English. I think it's because it came from the Spanish. No, it was translated from the Spanish, so it was my my fault for not to revise the translation. Sorry. And now we are in the decade of action, so we need to take action. And we in the standardization bodies, we are part of our goal, of our world, and of our society. So we need to work a little bit on this. Next, please. So yeah, you have seen the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. There are these, basically, if you see the top line, there are 5. The first 5 are more social, they are more related to people. The next 5, the one in the middle, they are more about economy, so they are more about prosperity. The last, the 12, 13, 14, and 15 are more about environment. So they are what it's there. You can relate them to the axis or to the P called planet. 16 is peace. So this is a clear P, and 17 is partnership. So if we go to the next, I think that the next slide shows this, yeah, in a different way. So you have this 5 Ps, and you have the the SDGs related to each of these axes. So planet, you see these environmental ones, people, the first one, the social ones, and prosperity, and are basically the industry and economic ones, which are the 5 in the middle. Partnerships, which is really cross-cutting, which is the partnership is 17. If you remember the wrap, the introduction, it was like the axis moving everything, and a piece which is also required. So let's go to next. Why this? Basically because Agenda 2030 is one of the challenges that are facing in our society and all the companies. When in UNE, I'm going to talk a little bit about UNE because it's our perspective, but when we started to develop our own internal strategy, we say, okay, what are the companies worried about? So the companies and the people, the entities around us, basically our stakeholders, our key stakeholders, besides the administration and also all the companies, they were worried about all these issues, about the ecological transition, the market, the resilience, the internationalization, innovation, the social challenges, and a 2030 agenda was one of the issues. So it's not something that we want to be more sustainable than anybody else or something like that. This is something that really drives many of the policies in our governments, and in Spain is particularly true because there's one let's say called ministry. It's not exactly a ministry, but a kind of about 2030 agenda. So basically it's in the government, in the agenda of the government, and it's also in the agenda of the companies, of the organizations and the associations, and they're worried about that. So that's why we wanted to work on it, and we wanted to consider this 2030 agenda. So next, please. I think this is yours, Claire, isn't
Yes,
it?
thank you, Daniel. So why this project and why now? So as we have just seen, the Agenda 2030 sets 17 goals with clear objectives, measurable targets to determine progress for each goal. So it can be seen as a toolkit that helps nations to allocate resources, set priorities, and enable change. This is now also at the heart of the European political agenda, which initiatives such as the Green Deal, but also more recently with the green and digital transition, and standardization at all levels, so national, European, and international, has had an impact on these topics for many years, but with little or no visibility. ISO and IEC, for instance, decided in 2018 to embark in this journey. At CEN and CENELEC, in addition to being mentioned as one of the 5 strategic priorities in a trust standard declaration in 2019, the contribution of standard to the UN SDG implementation is now listed as a priority of the CEN and CENELEC strategy 2030. So this project contributes to the objective of our organization and aims to give more visibility to the contribution of CEN and CENELEC to the SDG, but also how we support EU policy in the European context. If you go to the next slide, concretely, there are CEN and CENELEC action, like the London Declaration that was signed in September 2021, so recently, to combat climate change through standards and define commitment to achieve the climate agenda by 2050. CEN and CENELEC join forces with ISO, IEC, stakeholders, and partners to ensure that international, but also European standards accelerate achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement, the UN SDG, and the Green Deal. And on the right, you can see in 2019 already, CEN and CENELEC, as well as more than 20 of our members, signed the UNEC Declaration on Gender Responsive Standards. So the goal behind it is to strengthen the use of standards and technical regulation as powerful tools to attain the SDG 5, which is about gender equality and to empower all women and girls. If you look at, yes, next slide on the CEN and CENELEC strategy 2030. So as Daniel mentioned, and also in the introductory video, so the SDG represent a unique historic opportunity to make real changes. But to be achieved, this requires cooperation of all stakeholders, private, public, and the use of all available tools. So this is an urgent call for action for global partnerships to address these challenges. And this is a key component in a CENELEC strategic context, and also a driver for action, global collaboration, and partnerships to make sustainable development a reality for everyone. So I highlighted on this screen also where it was put forward in the strategy 2030 in CEN and CENELEC. So now again, we have a question for you. So Idem, on the next slide, you can share, you can go to menti.com. I will put it in the slide as well. Daniel was.
I put also
yeah.
I put the link,
Perfect.
but you can also go to Menti and copy it. Or
and the question is this time, which SDG do you think the standards contribute most? And I will hand over to Daniel. So which SDG do you think the standards contribute most?
okay, you are already answering, eh?
They are quick.
they were very fast. You don't sleep siesta.
I will do it also.
Which does your organization? I was watching it live, and in the beginning they were like everybody jumping to one in in 1 second. Now it's going a little bit more unbalanced. Okay, this is your organization. I don't know. I guess not all of you belong to national standardization bodies. Correct me if I'm wrong, but because the next question is quite similar to this one. The next question is, which SDGs do you think standards contribute most? And I'm going to take a look at the differences, if there are any differences. SDG 17, SDG 2. Okay, SDG 17 is surprising. SDG 9 is the winner, is the clear winner. I'm going to move to the next slide. Next question, which is in this. Okay. So you can. Okay, so now you can answer. The difference is the standards. Okay, the first one was your organization, and this one is standards. Okay. Maybe the answer at the end is quite similar, but what I'm trying to reproduce a little bit with these questions is our mental process when we started with this project. Okay, so we started to think, okay, SDGs, they look nice. The society is worried about them, so what can our contribution be? And then we started to make questions, not only about our contribution but our impact. How many SDGs? How can we measure these kind of things that we are also a little bit somehow reproducing in this project with CEN and CENELEC. So yeah, this is more balanced. Nobody with SDG 10 reducing inequalities. Okay. Okay, if you see, I'm going to put it smaller. This is the answer from question 1, which was clearly the clear winner was SDG 9, and then SDG 11, 12, and SDG 3, which is the health. And so these were like the podium were like these 3 ones. And now let's move to these ones. You shifted a little bit the podium to this. more or less the same, man. Not a big difference. Okay, what do I think? This is my personal opinion. My personal opinion. Can we go to? I think we have a next slide. Yes. I will stop sharing the screen now. Okay, I'll stop and you can, Whitney, if you can share the next screen, the next slide. Okay. Okay, I think that, well, basically standards have a greater role and a greater contribution in the, let's say, in the SDGs about prosperity, which basically is what you have reflected in your answer. So I agree with most of you. The standards basically contribute to SDG 9, 11, 12, which is basically industry and also health a little bit, and sometimes climate if you want, but basically prosperity and sometimes planet and maybe health, because there are many standards about health topics. But I think that with the standardization bodies, we play a big role in this SDG 17, which I was surprised that you reflected this SDG, and I'm also even more shocked about SDG 16. So if any of you can answer maybe in the chat or can post in the chat why you think SDG 16, because for me I'm curious about that, so I would appreciate that. But why SDG 17? Because we are a very particular organizations. We are all private non-profit associations, or most of us. We involve or we are like a link between the private sector and the authorities or the governments. We also try to involve, and we hardly try to involve, I would say, the NGOs and the consumers. So we are like we gather together many opinions. Okay, and it happens in all our bodies. It happens, for instance, in Spain. It happens in our board. Our board is composed by all these entities and of course by the TCs. The TCs are they try to, or we try to make them balance with different opinions and with all the stakeholders. And we are trying to promote the SDGs and the role of standards to achieve the SDGs, or to align the activities of the organizations with the SDGs within these technical bodies. So we think this is a good way to create partnerships, and we really believe that. It's not easy to measure. We don't. I struggle a little bit to measure what is our impact. I came with some small indicators, but none of them are really good. But I mean, we really believe that this is a little bit of our role. So that's it. Maybe next slide, and Claire, you can add something more about this project.
Yes, exactly. So let's move on now with the CEN and CENELEC project itself. So tell you more about that today. So in early 2021, CEN and CENELEC decided to embark in a project to achieve the SDG in a more systematic approach to standards. So the objective was to identify how CEN and CENELEC contribute to the implementation of the 2030 agenda and the associated SDG. And namely, the scope is on screen: to develop and apply an approach enabling the standardization community to demonstrate whether European standard is supporting one or several SDG. So this project was articulated around several activities that you can see in color on screen, notably the prioritization of those SDG that are the most relevant for CEN and CENELEC community, because obviously we were not in capacity to map all our portfolio of standards in less than a year. So we had to prioritize where we are contributing with the greatest value and taking into account also the European context. Another activity was to develop communication material to build awareness and provide guidance to the technical bodies. especially for the mapping exercise, for the experts, for you to be able to map, to link the standards to the SDG. And also an important activity was how to sustain the approach to capture the data automatically in the future. And this required changes in our CEN CENELEC IT system application. And finally, also the question how to embed the parallel work with ISO and IEC, as these two organizations have already done the mapping. So we needed also to look at this aspect. So the next slide, to achieve this objective and to build the foundation. Next slide, if possible, Whitney. We have created and released the framework to enable this systematic approach to link our standard to the SDG. To this end, last summer, we conducted a pilot project with some technical committees to review the methodologies, the approach, start raising awareness among experts and members, and also prioritizing the SDG for which we have the greatest value and also direct contribution in EU context, as I mentioned. We collected the data also with another exercise of mapping lately last year in November with a selected technical committee. And we also engage with our stakeholders, ISO, IEC, but also UNICE, the Regional Office of United Nations. We learn from their experiences. We receive positive feedback from ISO and IEC for this project and interest, and also from UNICE, which is also waiting from our mapping to link it to their website portal today. So I would like also in next slide to tell you a bit more on how has this project been executed. But the project team, the governance, and also the most important today is the main deliverables and the outcome. So if you go to the next slide for the project team. So the sponsor of this project is the CEN and CENELEC Technical Board, which initiated the project and set up an ad hoc steering group composed of members and partners like Daniel from UNE, but also 10 members from different countries. We operated with cross-functional teams within CCMC, and all departments were involved in specific activities. We were also in contact with leadership of selected CEN and CENELEC technical committee for the mapping. And as I mentioned, we have also engaged in regular catch-up and communication with our stakeholders, ISO, IEC, and UNICE. And now the next slide, the project outcome. So it's most important today. So the mapping exercise with the priority technical committee ended in January this year. So we have mapped 1,195 homegrown standards, so only CEN and CENELEC standards we targeted for this exercise. The sustained approach is now deployed since January this year. So for that, we have revised the CEN and CENELEC new work item form to include a new classification and SDG. And this has been endorsed by the CEN and CENELEC Technical Board. We have also embedded the mapping from ISO and IEC for the parallel work. We have updated all our IT application. I will also briefly mention this in the next slide to show you also the impact. And with the steering group, we have also developed a toolbox for you, for experts, to provide you more guidance to help you mapping the standards to have good quality data. And now the framework is deployed to capture this data automatically. Obviously, the mapping is a living and exercise and a continuous update. So the list will continue to grow and evolve as a new project or field of activities will be added. So now this mapping results is displayed on a dedicated CEN and CENELEC web pages, as well as individual standard pages since the end of April. I will show you shortly how we have organized the information. And there will be also a communication campaign from now to August this year to highlight this work. So if we go to the next slide. So the mapping results, I mentioned around 1,200 homegrown, so only CEN and CENELEC deliverables map in January. Since we have added the parallel work with ISO and IEC, plus also the data that we have captured from the new work item form since January this year, so since 4 months. So at the end of April, the digital mapping counting almost 5,000 standards, deliverables mapped and supporting at least one SDG. So it's around 20% of the total portfolio. If you click, there is an additional element. Yeah, we can see a predominant contribution of the standards to goal 3, 9, and 12. And click again, followed by the goal 7, 11, and 13. So if we take the first bubble, and for instance, the SDG 3 on good health and well-being, for instance, CEN and CENELEC contributes greatly with these sectors like medical devices, personal protective equipment, toy safety, or even textile for preventing chemical content. So all in support of legislation. So this is where also we are putting lots of efforts. And if we take another example in the second bubble, so the SDG 7, affordable and clean energy. So in this field, for example, for eco-design or energy labeling, we have at CEN and CENELEC 25 technical committees that produce European standards, dedicated method for measuring energy performance, various energy-related products, and also supporting European legislation. I added in the next slide because I found it interesting as well. It's a cartography of the European Commission that shows the SDG. If you can go to the next slide. And it shows that SDG are intrinsic part of the European political program, with really the objective to mainstream sustainability in all European policies. So it's quite interesting to see also how they have mapped the SDG to the main EU policy of today. And we can see also with this first data and highlights where our impact and added value is greatest at EU level. As I see there are a question, I will reply maybe to the question after by written. If we go to the next slide, I briefly mentioned the IT system and application that have been impacted. So in addition to the new work item form that has been revised to include the SDG to link for new or revised project, there is also a new classification. So in MIDAS, but this is our CEN and CENELEC database. And for you, it's visible on projects online. So you can see it since the end of March. There is also an exchange of data feed for a scene for our members, but from IT to IT, it's what we call HAPI, AAP. So this is just an idea of all the application that has been impacted today. So now concretely, if you go to the next slide, how to map a new or revised project. So as of 10th of January, so CEN and CENELEC Technical Committee are invited to add this data for a new or a revised project, which SDG this project contributes to. So this is valid for all deliverables, not only the standards, can be also technical specification, reports, and the 16 SDG, not the 17. The 17 SDGs, sorry, 17 on partnership is indicated as not applicable in the new work item form, as this relates to partnerships for which we think other types of activity are more relevant, such like engagement with partners outside Europe. Maybe you have seen on our website, we have put the global outreach report, the technical cooperation agreements with ISO and IEC. So this new data will be as any other data in a new work item form, now capture automatically to feed the digital mapping on the CEN and CENELEC website. Of course, as we have seen with the question previously, it's not an easy exercise. And this is also what we learned from ISO and IEC, that we needed also to provide a bit further guidance to the experts. So the steering group of members from CEN and CENELEC has developed a Sdg Toolbox, which is on the next slide, with tailored digital information on the United Nations SDG. So it's a kind of one-stop source with all information you need. It's an expert level guide for the technical committee to understand what the individual SDG means and how it can relate to the standard. It's not new information, but we know, having visited the UN website information and other website, that it's not easy to go through all this data information that we can have on SDG. So we wanted to provide you a really easy to read, user-friendly leaflet where we explain a bit more in a nutshell what is important to know and what is important for the standardization work. These leaflets are available on both CEN and CENELEC expert area. Now, again, let's see an example. And the question for you, I have not used the tool for this time, so you can enter your answer directly in a chat. I put on screen two examples of standards. So just looking at the title, the first one relates to circularity of fishing gear, recyclability, and the second one on accessibility in built environment. Well, could you indicate in a chat to which SDGs they could contribute? We, of course, advise to do the mapping by looking at the scope and the content of the standard with the TC secretaries and experts. But for the purpose of this webinar, we put an easy example to try and show you. And I will show you also in the next slide in a toolbox how it works. So yes, I see 14 for the first one. 14 is a life below water. And this 13 as well. Yes, about circularity of fishing gear. Exactly. We should look more in details. This is a new 12 also. This is a new field of activity for CEN and CENELEC. And it's about circularity, recyclability of fishing gear to incorporate repairing, recycling, environment monitoring, and data reporting. And it's in support of the directive for the reduction of the impact of certain plastic products on the environment. What is the question again is to which SDG this standard would contribute. So for the first one, circularity and recyclability of fishing gear. And the second, accessibility and usability of the built environment. And for built environment, one of the answers, yeah, SDG 11 and 12. So if you go to the next slide, I will, I put the answer on screen. So for the first one, indeed, it was SDG 14, life below water. And the second one, it was SDG 10 and 11, so reduce inequality, but also sustainable cities and communities. And I will show in the next slide if we, So this is an extract of the toolbox that has been developed by the steering group. And you can see 3 main sections. So starting from left, we have a short summary of the scope and the definition of the goal 14 now. Then at the top, we have the target audience and what your TC is asked to. So with a short summary of the targets and the measurement for this goal. As you know, we have the SDG and we have the targets, which are very much detailed. By looking at this information, so you should easily identify keywords and link into standardization work you do and see if relevant. I have highlighted in yellow, for instance, for this new standards, the keywords like fishing, marine biodiversity, marine pollution, prevent and significantly reduce marine pollution, sustainably manage and protect marine and coastal ecosystem. And if you go to the next slide, so the same exercise, but for accessibility, for the standard on accessibility in a built environment. So you can see also the three main sections. So we have done in the leaflets. And you can see the keywords also, so accessibility in this case, and also provide universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public spaces. So I invite you to look at the toolbox. Of course, it's also a living document, so we welcome any feedback and improvement for this exercise. I have another question, but more difficult, and I will hand over to Daniel for that one. So if you can go to the next slide, yes.
Okay, I think that I can paste here, yeah, the link. Yeah, you have it. Let me share the screen. So. $16, oof, many. Someone wrote the phone number.
It's a code.
All of them depends. Depends is I'm from Galicia. Galicia is in the northwest part of Spain, and we are famous because we always answer with this depends. It depends. We never give a clear answer, or we can answer with a question. So, and this is very famous. 17, 16. So one particular standard. Maybe it's. So you think many of you or most of you for the moment you think that one standard can contribute to the 17 SDGs. This is a little bit shocking for me, honestly. I think when I think on a particular standard on whatever, usually I cannot identify more than 3-4 SDGs usually, and not more than this. I don't know. 17 is quite for me. It seems to be nearly impossible, but maybe it's because the question is maybe not so well drafted, or maybe you really think that a standard contributes to 17 SDGs. When we came up, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Spain. When we came with this project, we started to see that some standards were quite easy to identify the SDGs. You've seen the example, and other standards were very difficult to identify the SDGs. In fact, we decided to go towards the targets, not the SDGs, but the targets, because with the targets was easier to identify. I mean, you have to go deeper and you have to think a little bit deeper, but at the end, the results were more consistent. And we did some tests with secretariats and with our mates here in our technical officers. and it's difficult to define more than 3 and 5. So for our mapping, I was answering because there was a question in the chat. For our mapping, we did like this. We combined we are combining, because we are still, this mapping is ongoing activity, and we are combining the answers provided by the secretariats with the checking by a technical officer, and trained technical officers, because all the technical officers have been trained on this topic. So yes, thank you very much. Depends. Okay, thanks for the clarification. I mean, for what standard there will be a different number of calls appropriate. Yes, okay, yeah, I agree with this. Yeah, but usually it's from 3 to 5, 3, 4, 5 for me. But it's, I made the word for man, and we arrive to 13 SDGs. It's quite a lot. 13 SDGs. I've seen only this in some of these management system standards. ISO 9001, ISO 14001, which are quite horizontal, and some of them you can claim that they impact in the 17 SDGs. We introduced a new, also another key issue to clarify a little bit in Spain. We ask the secretaries to quantify a little bit the impact on each standard for each SDG. So it's low, medium, high. It's very simple, but it makes you think a little bit about this. Anyway, I mean, we are starting with this. We are progressing. This is a tool that I'm sure that will evolve not only in Spain but in Europe and also in ISO. So yeah, we are evolving, and we are learning by doing, basically. So Claire, please go ahead.
Yeah. No, exactly. And I see related the question from Tobias, sorry, related to the toolbox. And that's true. We have not done any prioritization regarding the SDGs. So when you tick the boxes, you can tick it in whatever order you want. So that's why we would also advise to link the most relevant SDG. We know it can be wider, but for now we are also starting this approach. So we will fine tune in the future for sure. But the most we need also to highlight in this mapping the most relevant contribution. So that's why, for instance, for this standard on fishing gear, the most relevant is the SDG 14. And yeah, of course, we can map the standard to maybe more SDG. For accessibility in built environment, there were 2 or 3. It could be also maybe more, but these are the most relevant for now. I know UNE is doing a bit more further, but we were not in capacity to do that in granularity also with the targets and so on. But that's why we also put it in a toolbox. So you have also the measurable, the targets. So we advise you to look at this to make sure it's relevant goals, and also that we have good data to display for the digital mapping on the CEN and CENELEC website. So now I see there are other questions, but we have 7 minutes left, so we will reply to all the questions by
I'm trying to reply some of them in written. Okay.
Perfect. Just a quick also overview of how we have organized the information on the new website pages. So we have a new look. So these new web pages are fully integrated as a new section of the CEN and CENELEC website. You can see it still today on the main pages, and it's in the first menu when you scroll down. If you go to the next slide, so when you arrive, the landing page give you an overview, so the impact at a glance with interactive visual. An overview of how many standards contribute to each goal that you can click, and this is evolving, so day after day, so the number continue growing. And you have also a brief introduction. So what are the UN SDG and what we are doing at CEN and CENELEC, how to get involved. And if you go to the next slide, yeah, this is also kind of important information. So we have individual pages on each SDG. So you can explore them individually to see which standards contribute to the SDG. You can filter with the search functionality, quickly search for individual standards and which CEN or CENELEC technical committee develop them. So find out also more on the current work or the published work. On the long term, it aims to reinforce, of course, as we have seen, the obvious link between standard and the SDG, but also in the future to move beyond and to explore new opportunities and also to strengthen the energy between stakeholders. So we have ambitions for the 2030 agenda. So next slide. So this is what I explained. So you have cumulative search criteria where we have listed all the goals and you can filter further with some criteria that are in the current search. In the next slide. So once you have targeted one standard, you can also see on individual standard pages the SDG icon, so at the top between the title of the standard and the project. So it's visually there. And the next slide. One new section is about new activities and stories. We have here feature all relevant material, like the London Declaration, all the brief news. We did some social media campaign last year on the World Standard Days. The theme was SDG. With ISO and IEC. We have also completed this section with emerging activities and the sector's approach to circularity and sustainability. And we have started to list over the last 2 years, the new technical committee working group created to reply to these sustainability demands and needs, like the example for the circularity of fishing gear, but there are more like microplastic sources for textile and also other sectors involved. So I invite you also to have a look at these new web pages, and we will keep it up to date regularly. And to finish also, it's a communication campaign that I mentioned at the beginning. So we are starting a 5-month communication campaign to promote this new digital mapping and the work and the outcome of this project. So it will end of August, and there are several activities planned along this month, as you can see on screen. And the next slide is the conclusion and the takeaway. And we are on time. I see we're 2 minutes left, so perfect. So as we explained at the beginning, it's important to understand that this project is the foundation, the first phase, and it's a first phase for CEN and CENELEC to embark in this journey on the SDG. So we have started to build awareness in the European standardization community within the European and international context and the purpose of 2030. But of course, it's a long journey. This is high in the agenda for everybody, and at EU level, at ISO, at IEC, at national level, at European level, at CEN CENELEC. We have provided a final report to the CEN and CENELEC Technical Board with a recommendation. It's currently circulated also, so they will also provide their opinions and recommendations for the future. And what we would like you to take away with you today, it's that everyone contribute to the achievement of the SDG. So consumer, businesses, governments, everyone, and standardizer. It's relevant for all business sector. It's not only environment. It's at the heart of EU policy and CEN CENELEC Strategy 2030. We invite you to look at the toolbox. And we invite you to map the standard to contribute to the exercise of the SDG. So in a new CEN CENELEC new work item form. If you have any question, any doubts, please contact your CCMC sectoral project manager, and we will coordinate to provide you the relevant support. Daniel, you may want to complement or conclude this webinar.
Yeah, but I'm with the questions. I love the questions. Thank you. In fact, when I'm doing this kind of training or of activities in Spain, I open the mic and and want to receive some feedback. But it comes. I detect some concerns about
Okay.
this issue. I think. So my message is that I think that this is an evolving project. This is an ongoing activity. Okay, so don't expect that this is something closed. I'm pretty sure I don't work for CEN and CENELEC, but I know them, and I'm pretty sure that you will evolve. I mean that this tool, because it's evolving in ISO, it's evolving in Spain, so I'm pretty sure that it will evolve. And there are many things that are not really clear answers. I mean, you cannot identify this standard with this SDG, okay? But the idea is we need to consider SDGs. This is key for us. And we are starting with this. We think this is a good way to start. Maybe if you take a look at this in a few years, 2 or 3 years time, probably it will look something completely different, or we come to different conclusions. But we are working all together. I mean, we are all together in the same boat, and we are evolving all together. So please do not hesitate to send your questions, as Claire, or your concerns or your thoughts about this to CCMC, and I'm quite sure that we will be happy to share and to address them. So thank you very much. Thanks CENELEC for inviting me. It's a pleasure to share this time with you, and it's a pleasure to receive your questions and to know what you think about this. So thank you very much for everything.
Thank you very much, Daniel. It was very much appreciated to have you today. And thank to all the participants. So all the material will be sent to you by email, the presentation and the recording. We have also included in the last slide all the background links that can be relevant and useful information, like the UN website, the ISO, the IEC website, but also UNE website, as I also did some work on that, and also UNICE website. And there are more also information available on our web pages today. So thank you very much all. We are just on time. I'm very happy. Let's continue this big challenge, and have a good end of the day. Thank you.
Now, before I let you go, I would like to draw your attention to our upcoming webinars. We have on the 8th and 9th of June, Putting Science into Standards workshop, #StandardsForAI. And on June 30th, we have the webinar, The Potential of European Standards to Support the European Strategy Towards a Green and Sustainable Environment. Thank you for your participation today, and we look forward to seeing you at our next webinars.